Britain prides itself on being a diverse and tolerant nation. Politicians love to claim that racism is no longer a serious issue, that the days of discrimination are behind us. But if that were true, why do black people still face higher unemployment rates, harsher policing, and constant racial profiling? Why does the media continue to portray them as criminals, while ignoring the real injustices they face? The truth is, racism in the United Kingdom is not just alive. It is deeply rooted in the very systems that govern society. It is in the schools, the workplaces, the criminal justice system, and even in the healthcare industry. It is not always as obvious as racial slurs or segregation. Sometimes, it is the opportunities that are denied, the assumptions that are made, the way black voices are dismissed or ignored. It is the unspoken rules that determine who gets ahead and who is left behind. Take the Windrush scandal, for example. Thousands of black Britons, many of whom had lived and worked in the country for decades, were wrongfully detained, deported, or denied legal rights. They had built lives, contributed to the economy, and raised families in the UK, yet they were treated as if they did not belong. The government's so-called mistake destroyed lives, yet the outrage was brief and accountability was limited. If Britain were truly post-racial, how could something like this happen? Racial disparities in policing are another glaring issue. Black people in the UK are 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched by the police compared to white people. The justification is often that stop-and-search tactics help prevent crime, but the statistics do not support that claim. Instead, they show a pattern of racial profiling that criminalizes black communities while failing to make Britain any safer. The tragic case of Chris Kaba is just one example of how the system continues to fail black Britons. An unarmed black man, shot dead by police in London. His death sparked outrage, yet incidents like these continue to happen. The deeper issue is not just about individual officers making poor decisions. It is about a system that views black men as threats, a system that does not hesitate to use deadly force against them, while extending restraint and benefit of the doubt to others. Racism in the UK is not limited to policing. It extends into education, where black students face disproportionately high exclusion rates. They are more likely to be labeled as disruptive, less likely to be placed in higher academic tracks, and often find themselves discouraged from pursuing higher education. Schools are supposed to be places of learning and growth, yet for many black students, they become places of constant battles against discrimination. The workplace is no different. Studies have repeatedly shown that job applicants with traditionally African or Caribbean-sounding names are less likely to be called for interviews than those with white-sounding names, even when their qualifications are identical. Even for those who manage to secure jobs, the racial pay gap remains a persistent issue. Black workers earn significantly less than their white counterparts, and career progression remains a struggle due to unspoken biases and systemic barriers. The media plays a powerful role in shaping public perception, and unfortunately, it often reinforces negative stereotypes. When a black person is involved in a crime, their race is emphasized in headlines. When a white person commits a similar crime, they're often humanized, with discussions about their mental health or difficult upbringing. These narratives shape public opinion and contribute to the biases that influence everything from hiring decisions to jury verdicts. One of the most glaring examples of media bias in the UK was the treatment of Meghan Markle compared to Kate Middleton. The same actions that were praised when performed by Kate were criticized when done by Meghan. From the way she held her baby bump to the way she interacted with the public, the double standards were undeniable. While some dismissed the criticism as mere tabloid gossip, it was a reflection of a much deeper issue: Britain's unwillingness to accept a black woman in a position of prominence within the royal family. Racism in Britain is not just about individual acts of discrimination. It is about a system that continues to place black people at a disadvantage while allowing white privilege to go unchallenged. It is about a history that has never been fully acknowledged, a present that remains unequal, and a future that will not change unless real action is taken. Change starts with awareness, but awareness alone is not enough. There must be structural changes in education, employment, policing, and media representation. The question is, will Britain finally confront its racism problem, or will it continue to pretend it does not exist? This is just the beginning of the conversation. The deeper we look, the clearer it becomes that racism in the UK is not a thing of the past. It is a reality that millions live with every day. Racism in Britain is not just about history. It is about the reality Black communities face every single day, whether it is at work, in schools, in interactions with law enforcement, or in the way they are portrayed in the media. The system was never designed for fairness. It was built on exclusion, and that legacy continues to shape opportunities, outcomes, and even perceptions of Black people in the UK today. The education system is one of the earliest places where these disparities become clear. Black children are often labeled as disruptive or less capable by teachers who carry unconscious biases. Studies show that Black students, especially Black boys, are far more likely to be excluded from school compared to their white peers. These exclusions are not just statistics. They represent real children whose futures are being stolen from them before they even get a chance to build them. Beyond the discipline gap, there's also a glaring issue with what is taught in schools. The British education system largely ignores the history of colonialism, the transatlantic slave trade, and the contributions of Black Britons to the country's development. Many students graduate without ever learning about how Britain built its wealth through the exploitation of Africa and the Caribbean. Instead, the curriculum focuses on a version of history that glorifies the empire while minimizing its brutal past. For Black students, this erasure is not just an academic issue. It is a personal one. It sends the message that their history does not matter, that their ancestors' struggles are not worth remembering. Without an honest education about the past, how can Britain ever hope to address the racial injustices of the present? The effects of racism in education do not stop at the classroom door. They follow Black students into the job market, where the odds are stacked against them from the very beginning. The racial pay gap is a reality that cannot be ignored. Even with the same qualifications, Black workers consistently earn less than their white counterparts. They are less likely to be promoted, more likely to face workplace discrimination, and often struggle to break into industries where networking and privilege play a significant role. The concept of the ethnic pay gap is not just a theory. It is backed by decades of research. A Black graduate can leave university with top grades, yet still be paid significantly less than a white colleague with the same credentials. Some employers justify this by blaming differences in experience or skills, but when every study points to the same pattern, the problem is clearly systemic. Even for Black professionals who manage to climb the corporate ladder, the challenges do not disappear. Many report experiencing microaggressions, subtle but damaging comments or actions that reinforce racial stereotypes. Whether it is being mistaken for a junior employee despite years of experience, or being told that they are too aggressive for simply voicing an opinion, these daily indignities add up. This constant battle to prove oneself, to be twice as good just to receive half the recognition, is a weight that Black professionals carry every day. The pressure to navigate white-dominated workplaces while suppressing frustrations and avoiding being labeled as difficult takes a mental and emotional toll. Many Black employees end up leaving industries altogether, not because they lack talent or ambition, but because they are exhausted from constantly fighting a system that was never built for them. The discrimination extends beyond the office. Black Britons face barriers in housing, with landlords often refusing to rent to them based on racial biases. Studies have shown that applicants with African or Caribbean-sounding names are far less likely to be offered viewings for properties. This means that even something as basic as securing a place to live can become an uphill battle when race is factored in. In healthcare, the disparities are even more concerning. Black women in the UK are 4 times more likely to die during childbirth compared to white women. This is not due to biological differences, but rather systemic racism within the medical field. Studies have shown that Black patients are less likely to have their pain taken seriously by doctors, leading to delays in treatment and worse health outcomes. The shocking reality is that racism in Britain is not just about social inequality. It is quite literally a matter of life and death. Yet despite these overwhelming disadvantages, Black communities continue to resist, to build, and to push for change. The fight against racism in the UK is not new, and it is not over. From civil rights movements of the past to modern activism, There has always been a demand for justice, equality, and recognition. Black Britons have made countless contributions to the country, shaping its culture, economy, and history in ways that are rarely acknowledged. From influential writers and artists to groundbreaking politicians and activists, their impact is undeniable. And yet, the struggle for basic rights and fair treatment continues. For meaningful change to happen, the UK must go beyond empty words and performative gestures. It is not enough to celebrate Black History Month while ignoring the realities Black people face the rest of the year. It is not enough for corporations to post about diversity on social media while failing to address discrimination in their own workplaces. Real change requires structural reform, policy changes, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. The question is, will Britain finally take responsibility for its racism problem, or will it continue to pretend that these issues do not exist? The answer to that question will shape the future, not just for Black Britons, but for the country as a whole. The conversation is not over. The deeper we go, the more we uncover the truth about how racism operates in the UK. The next part of this discussion will expose even more hidden injustices that many would rather keep buried. Racism in the United Kingdom is not just an issue of the past, nor is it confined to individual acts of prejudice. It is a system that continues to shape laws, policies, and everyday experiences. While some may argue that the country has progressed, the reality is that many Black Britons still find themselves fighting for the most basic rights and opportunities. One of the most dangerous myths surrounding racism in Britain is the belief that it is not as severe as in other countries. People often compare the UK to the United States, pointing out the absence of a visible civil rights movement or large-scale police brutality cases on the same level as those seen in America. But comparison does not erase reality. Just because racism in Britain operates differently does not mean it is any less harmful. The way racism manifests in Britain is often subtle, hidden beneath layers of politeness and avoidance. It is in the unspoken rules of who gets access to power, who is given the benefit of the doubt, and who is excluded from opportunities. It is in the coded language used in news reports, the policies that disproportionately affect Black communities, and the everyday interactions that remind Black Britons that they are still seen as outsiders in their own country. This deeply ingrained racism is perhaps most evident in the criminal justice system. The statistics are impossible to ignore. Black people are more likely to be arrested, more likely to be charged, and more likely to receive longer sentences compared to white individuals accused of the same crimes. The prison population reflects this disparity, with Black people significantly overrepresented despite making up a small percentage of the UK population. One of the most alarming aspects of this system is the treatment of Black youth. The government claims to support young people, yet Black boys are disproportionately targeted by law enforcement from an early age. Many are placed on gang databases without evidence, monitored by police, and subjected to constant suspicion. The result is a cycle where young Black men are criminalized before they even have a chance to prove themselves. The impact of this extends beyond policing. It affects entire families and communities. When Black fathers and brothers are taken away by an unjust system, it creates instability, financial struggles, and emotional trauma. Children grow up seeing their loved ones targeted, and many internalize the message that no matter what they do, society will always view them as threats. The media plays a significant role in reinforcing these harmful perceptions. News outlets frequently portray Black crime as a reflection of cultural or racial issues, while white crime is often attributed to personal struggles or mental health challenges. This narrative creates fear, influencing public opinion and justifying harsher policies against Black communities. Politicians and public figures often contribute to this problem. They use inflammatory language, blaming immigration and multiculturalism for social issues while ignoring the systemic racism that continues to harm Black Britons. They use Black culture for entertainment, profit from diversity initiatives, and yet do nothing when real change is needed. The irony is that Britain has benefited immensely from Black labor, culture, and contributions. From music and fashion to business and politics, Black Britons have shaped the country in ways that cannot be ignored. Yet, when it comes to recognizing their struggles, the silence is deafening. Despite these challenges, Black communities continue to resist, rebuild, and push forward. Grassroots organizations, activists, and leaders are working tirelessly to fight for justice, challenge discrimination, and create opportunities for future generations. Social media has given a platform to voices that mainstream media once ignored, allowing for real conversations about racism, inequality, and the need for systemic change. The question remains, will Britain listen? Will it acknowledge its racism problem and take meaningful action, or will it continue to turn a blind eye? History has shown that ignoring injustice does not make it disappear. It only allows it to grow stronger. Change requires more than just conversations. It requires policies that address racial disparities, educational reforms that include the full history of the British Empire, and a justice system that treats all citizens fairly. It requires a shift in how Black people are seen, valued, and treated in every aspect of society. The truth is uncomfortable, but it cannot be ignored. Britain still has a racism problem, and until it is confronted head-on, real progress will remain out of reach. The conversation does not end here. The final part of this discussion will reveal what must be done to create lasting change, and whether Britain is truly ready to face its dark reality. The fight against racism in the United Kingdom is not just about exposing injustice. It is about demanding real change. Black Britons have been fighting for their rights for generations, but the question remains, will Britain ever truly listen? Every time there is an outcry over racism, there is a pattern, a moment of shock, a wave of media coverage, performative statements from politicians and corporations, and then silence. The cycle repeats itself, but nothing fundamentally changes. The structures that uphold racial inequality remain untouched. Take the government's response to racial issues. Whenever a report is commissioned to examine racism in the UK, the findings are often watered down or outright dismissed. The 2021 Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities report, for example, suggested that Britain was not institutionally racist. It ignored overwhelming evidence from countless studies, lived experiences, and real-world data. Instead of confronting the issue, the report attempted to rewrite the narrative, suggesting that racism was not as big of a problem as people claimed. But Black Britons know the truth. They live it every single day. The denial of racism does not erase the struggles of Black workers who face discrimination in hiring. It does not change the statistics showing how Black students are disproportionately excluded from schools. It does not undo the countless cases of racial profiling, police brutality, and unfair sentencing in the criminal justice system. Racism in Britain is not just an individual problem. It is systemic. It is woven into the very fabric of institutions, policies, and cultural attitudes. It cannot be solved with token gestures, one-time diversity campaigns, or hollow apologies. It requires real, structural change. One of the most critical areas that needs reform is the education system. Schools must teach the full history of the British Empire, including the exploitation of Africa and the Caribbean. Children should learn about figures like Olaudah, Equiano, Mary Seacole, and the countless Black Britons who shaped history but were erased from textbooks. Education is not just about history. It is about shaping the future. Black children deserve to see themselves reflected in the curriculum, to grow up knowing that their heritage is valuable and that they belong. Teaching an honest version of history is not about blaming or dividing people. It is about ensuring that future generations understand the truth and work towards a more just society. The workplace also needs radical change. Companies must go beyond performative diversity initiatives and commit to dismantling racial barriers. This means closing the racial pay gap, creating pathways for Black professionals to advance, and addressing workplace discrimination with real consequences for offenders. In the justice system, racial profiling must end. The disproportionate targeting of Black communities by law enforcement has destroyed lives and fostered deep mistrust. Reforming policing, ending the excessive use of stop and search, and ensuring accountability for police misconduct are necessary steps toward justice. The media must also take responsibility for the narratives it promotes. Sensationalized headlines, racialized crime reporting, and the constant portrayal of Black people as threats contribute to real-world harm. Representation matters, but it must be authentic, diverse, and free from stereotypes. Change is possible, but it will not come easily. It will require Britain to acknowledge its racism problem, to stop dismissing black voices, and to take action beyond empty promises. It will require people in positions of power to listen, to challenge their own biases, and to use their influence to break down systemic barriers. The burden should not fall solely on black communities to fight for justice. It is a collective responsibility. White allies must do more than just express sympathy. They must actively challenge racism when they see it, whether it is in the workplace, in social settings, or in their own families. Silence only enables oppression. Real progress will only come when Britain stops pretending that racism is someone else's problem. It is not just a problem for black people. It is a problem for the entire country. A society built on injustice can never truly thrive. The future is not set in stone. Britain has a choice: to continue on its current path, ignoring the voices of those demanding justice, or to face its dark reality and work toward real change. The time for awareness has passed. The time for action is now.